Marcus Sterling, a 34-year-old tech billionaire and CEO of Sterling Industries, has built his empire on calculated decisions and emotional detachment. After his publicist arranges dates with 8 stunning models for a charity gala, Marcus rejects them all, finding their superficiality insufferable. However, when he impulsively stops at a small florist shop in Brooklyn to buy flowers for his late mother's grave, he encounters Elena Rodriguez, a 29-year-old widowed florist whose genuine warmth and resilience captivate him in ways no amount of wealth or beauty ever could. As Marcus finds himself drawn to Elena's authentic world of simple joys and profound losses, he must confront whether he's brave enough to risk his guarded heart for real love. Before we begin, tell us, from which city or country are you watching this story? It's always incredible to know how far these narratives reach. The crystal chandelier cast fractured light across the mahogany conference table as Marcus Sterling loosened his Hermes tie with visible irritation. 8 glossy photographs lay scattered before him like discarded playing cards, each featuring a woman who could grace any magazine cover. "This one's a Victoria's Secret angel," his publicist Catherine Walsh said, sliding another photo forward with manicured fingers. "Sophia Chen, 22, speaks 4 languages, just walked for Milan Fashion Week." Marcus didn't even glance down. His steel-gray eyes remained fixed on the Manhattan skyline beyond his corner office windows, watching the ant-like pedestrians navigate the streets 47 floors below. "No, Marcus, please." Catherine's voice carried the strained patience of someone who'd been having this conversation for 3 weeks. "The Sterling Foundation Gala is in 5 days. You need a date. The press can expect whatever they want." Marcus stood abruptly, his 6'2" frame casting a shadow across the rejected photographs. "I'm not parading around with some Instagram model who thinks philanthropy is a designer handbag brand." Catherine gathered the photos with sharp, efficient movements. "These women are successful, accomplished. They're beautiful mannequins with trust funds." Marcus moved to the window, pressing his palm against the cool glass. "Do you know what the last one asked me? If my yacht had good Wi-Fi for her TikTok videos? That was Amber. She's actually quite intelligent. She spent 20 minutes explaining why she only drinks water that's been blessed by Tibetan monks." Marcus turned back to face Catherine, his expression carved from granite. "I'd rather go alone." Catherine's perfectly contoured face flushed with frustration. "You can't go alone, Marcus, not to your own gala. The board members, the investors, the media, they all expect to see Sterling Industries' eligible bachelor CEO with someone appropriate." Appropriate? Marcus tasted the word like something bitter. "You mean someone who looks good in photographs and won't ask uncomfortable questions about where my money comes from? I mean someone who complements your image, someone who understands your world." Marcus walked to his desk and picked up a silver-framed photograph, the only personal item in his sterile office. His mother's gentle smile looked back at him from behind the glass, taken just months before the cancer claimed her 5 years ago. "My mother would have hated every single one of those women," he said quietly. Catherine's expression softened marginally. "Marcus, I know you miss her, but schedule cleared for today." Marcus grabbed his jacket from the leather chair. "I need some air. What about the Yamamoto meeting? Reschedule it." Marcus was already heading toward the door, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the polished marble floor. "And Catherine, stop sending me women who look like they've never experienced a genuine emotion in their lives." The elevator descended in smooth silence, carrying Marcus away from the rarefied air of corporate America and toward the bustling reality of street level. His driver, James, immediately straightened as Marcus emerged from the Sterling Industries building. "Where to, Mr. Sterling?" Marcus paused, his mother's photograph still clutched in his hand. Today marked the 5th anniversary of her death, a detail he'd mentioned to no one, not even Catherine. Every year, he visited her grave with white roses, her favorite flowers. Brooklyn, Greenwood Cemetery, the drive through Manhattan's congested streets gave Marcus time to think, though thinking was exactly what he wanted to avoid. The rejected photographs had stirred something uncomfortable in his chest, not desire, but a hollow recognition. Those women reminded him too much of himself, beautiful surfaces hiding carefully constructed emptiness. He'd built Sterling Industries from a college dorm room into a tech empire worth billions, but somewhere along the way, he'd forgotten how to feel anything beyond the satisfaction of a completed acquisition or a favorable quarterly report. His penthouse apartment was filled with priceless art he never looked at, his garage housed cars he rarely drove, and his contacts list contained hundreds of people who would disappear the moment his stock price dropped. The Mercedes pulled up outside Greenwood Cemetery's Gothic gates. Marcus dismissed James with instructions to wait, then walked alone through the sprawling grounds where Brooklyn's history lay buried in marble and granite. His mother's grave sat beneath an oak tree, whose branches had grown fuller in the 5 years since her burial. Marcus knelt and placed his hand on the smooth headstone. Margaret Sterling, beloved mother and teacher. She saw beauty in everything. "I don't know what I'm doing, Mum," he whispered, his voice barely audible above the distant traffic. "You always said I'd know love when I found it, but I think I've forgotten how to recognize anything real." Standing, Marcus realized he'd forgotten to bring flowers, the first time in 5 years. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man worth $3 billion who couldn't remember to honor the only person who'd ever loved him unconditionally. A small hand-painted sign across from the cemetery caught his attention. Elena's Garden, fresh flowers and hope. The shop looked nothing like the sterile flower arrangements delivered to his office. This was a riot of color and life, with buckets of wildflowers crowding the sidewalk and vines climbing up the brick facade. A bell chimed as Marcus pushed open the glass door, and immediately he was enveloped in the scent of earth and growing things. The shop was cramped but warm, every surface covered with flowers in various stages of bloom. It felt like stepping into a secret garden. "I'll be right with you," a voice called from somewhere behind a towering display of sunflowers. Marcus found himself genuinely curious about the voice's owner, something that hadn't happened in years. Most people either wanted something from him or were performing for his benefit. This voice sounded real. When she emerged from behind the sunflowers, Marcus Sterling, a man who'd negotiated with world leaders and closed deals worth hundreds of millions, found himself completely speechless. Elena Rodriguez emerged from behind the sunflowers, carrying a watering can, her dark hair escaping from a loose bun and her hands stained with soil. She wore a simple yellow sundress that had seen better days, and when she looked up at Marcus, her brown eyes held a directness that made him feel exposed. "Oh," she set down the watering can, wiping her hands on a small towel tied to her apron. "I'm sorry, I didn't hear you come in. How can I help you?" For a moment, Marcus forgot how to speak. Not because Elena was conventionally beautiful, though she was in an effortless way that had nothing to do with surgical enhancements or professional makeup, but because she looked at him like he was just another person. Not a CEO, not a billionaire, just a man who'd walked into her flower shop. "I need white roses," he managed, his voice rougher than usual. Elena's expression shifted slightly, something knowing and gentle crossing her features. "For someone special? My mother. She passed 5 years ago today." The words came out before Marcus could stop them. He never shared personal information with strangers. It was a cardinal rule in his world. But something about Elena's presence made honesty feel safe. "I'm so sorry for your loss." Elena's voice carried genuine sympathy, not the practiced condolences Marcus had grown accustomed to at business functions. "White roses are perfect. They represent new beginnings and eternal love. She must have been wonderful. She was the only person who ever—" Marcus trailed off, surprised by the emotion threatening to surface. "She was everything good about me." Eleanor studied his face for a moment, then moved toward a refrigerated case filled with pristine white roses. "My husband used to say that the people we love never really leave us. They live in every kind thing we do, every moment of joy we allow ourselves." She paused, her fingers gentle on the rose stems. He was right, though it took me a long time to believe it. "Your husband?" Marcus found himself genuinely interested in her answer. Another unprecedented occurrence. "David, he died 2 years ago. Car accident." Elena's voice remained steady, but Marcus caught the slight tremor in her hands as she selected the roses. "He was a teacher, loved literature, always said flowers were nature's poetry." Marcus watched her work, noting how she touched each rose like it mattered, how she arranged them with careful attention to their natural beauty rather than forcing them into perfect symmetry. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it in a way he hadn't meant anything in years. "Thank you." Elena looked up from the roses, and Marcus saw strength there alongside the sadness. "Some days are harder than others, but this shop, it keeps me connected to life, to growing things." She wrapped the roses in simple brown paper tied with twine, nothing like the elaborate presentations from high-end florists Marcus was accustomed to. Somehow, these looked more beautiful. "That'll be $38, Elena said, handing him the bouquet. Marcus reached for his wallet, then froze. The smallest bill he carried was $100. He pulled it out, acutely aware of how ostentatious it must seem in this modest shop. Elena took the bill without comment, moved to an old-fashioned register, and counted out his change with the same careful attention she'd given the flowers. "Keep it," Marcus said when she tried to hand him the change. "That's very generous, but I can't accept—" "Please." Marcus's voice came out more urgent than he intended. For the poetry." Elena smiled then, the first real smile Marcus had seen from her, and it transformed her entire face. David would have liked that. "Thank you." As Marcus turned to leave, Elena called out, "Wait." She disappeared behind the sunflowers again and emerged with a small sprig of baby's breath. "For hope," she said, tucking it into his bouquet. "Your mother would want you to have hope." Marcus felt something crack open in his chest, not painful but startling, like the first breath after holding it too long. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena Rodriguez." "And you're—" "Marcus." He paused, then made a decision that would have terrified his security team. "Just Marcus." "Well, just Marcus," Elena said with a teasing lilt that made him almost smile. "I hope your visit with your mother brings you peace." Outside the shop, Marcus sat in his Mercedes, the roses on his lap, and stared at Elena's garden through the tinted windows. Elena was visible through the glass back to watering her flowers, humming something soft and content. "Everything all right, Mr. Sterling?" James asked from the driver's seat. Marcus realized he'd been sitting there for nearly 10 minutes just watching. "Yes," he said slowly. "Actually, I think it might be." At the cemetery, Marcus placed the roses on his mother's grave, including Elena's sprig of baby's breath. For the first time in 5 years, he found himself talking to the headstone not about business or regrets, but about a woman who'd made him remember what genuine kindness looked like. That evening, in his penthouse apartment overlooking Central Park, Marcus stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows with a glass of 30-year-old whiskey he couldn't taste. His mind kept returning to Elena's shop, to her soil-stained hands, and the way she'd looked at him like he mattered as a person, not a portfolio. His phone buzzed with messages from Catherine about the gala, from board members about acquisitions, from people who needed him to be Marcus Sterling, CEO. But all he could think about was a woman who'd given him hope along with his flowers, who understood loss and chose life anyway. For the first time in years, Marcus Sterling went to bed, thinking about someone other than himself. 3 days had passed since Marcus's visit to Elena's garden, and he'd thought about her exactly 4,247 times, not that he was counting. He'd also driven past her shop twice, which was completely unlike him and mildly concerning from a productivity standpoint. The Sterling Foundation Gala was tomorrow night, and Catherine had finally stopped pestering him about finding a date. She'd probably assumed he'd come to his senses and choose one of the 8 models. She was wrong. Marcus stared at his computer screen, supposedly reviewing quarterly projections, but the numbers blurred together. Instead, he found himself researching small business loans, flower industry statistics, and, most embarrassingly, Googling how to ask a florist on a date without seeming like a creepy billionaire. The results were not encouraging. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Sterling? Your 3 p.m. appointment is here." Marcus frowned. He'd deliberately kept his schedule clear. "I don't have a 3 p.m. "Actually, you do now." Catherine's voice carried a smugness that made Marcus's stomach drop. "There's someone here I think you should meet." Before Marcus could object, his office door opened, and Catherine walked in, followed by a stunning brunette who moved like she was perpetually on a runway. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary and smiled with the practiced perfection of someone accustomed to getting whatever she wanted. "Marcus, I'd like you to meet Victoria Ashford," Catherine said with barely concealed triumph. "She just flew in from Paris." Victoria extended a perfectly manicured hand. "Mr. Sterling, what an absolute pleasure. I've heard so much about your incredible success." Marcus shook her hand briefly, noting how soft it was, clearly someone who'd never touched soil or worked with her hands. "Ms. Ashford, please call me Victoria." She settled into the chair across from his desk with practiced elegance. "Catherine tells me you need a companion for tomorrow's gala. I happen to be available." "How fortunate," Marcus said dryly. "I know this is sudden, but I think we'd make a striking couple. I've done extensive charity work in Europe, mostly galas, fundraising events. I understand the importance of image in your position." As Victoria continued talking about her charitable photography shoots and networking events, Marcus felt the familiar hollowness returning. This woman was everything his world expected: beautiful, sophisticated, available. She was also everything his mother would have seen through instantly. "Excuse me," Marcus interrupted. I need to make a call. He walked to the window, pulling out his phone, and did something that surprised even him. He called information. Brooklyn listings, please. Elena's garden florist shop. Within minutes, he had Elena's number programmed into his phone. His finger hovered over the call button, while Victoria and Catherine discussed color coordination and photographers in the background. Instead of calling, he made a decision that would have given his security team collective heart attacks. Catherine, reschedule the rest of my day. I'm going out. Marcus, Victoria flew all the way from Miss Ashford. It was lovely meeting you. Catherine will arrange your transportation back to the airport. Marcus was already grabbing his jacket, leaving two very stunned women in his wake. 20 minutes later, he stood outside Elena's garden, watching her through the window as she arranged a bouquet for an elderly man. Her face was animated as she talked, her hands gentle but confident with the flowers. She wore jeans and a green t-shirt today, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, and she looked more beautiful than any woman in any designer gown. The bell chimed as Marcus entered. Elena looked up and smiled, not the calculated smile he was used to, but something genuine and warm. Marcus, what a nice surprise. She finished tying the bouquet with ribbon. More roses for your mother. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. The elderly customer paid for his flowers and left with a cheerful wave. Elena turned her full attention to Marcus, and he felt that same unsettling sensation of being truly seen. I have this event tomorrow night, a charity gala for my foundation. It's... Marcus paused, realizing how his world must sound to someone like Elena. It's probably not your kind of thing. Rich people in expensive clothes pretending to care about causes while eating $1,000-a-plate dinners. Elena's eyebrows rose slightly. Your foundation? Sterling Foundation. We fund education programs, mostly in underserved communities. Marcus found himself talking faster, nervous in a way he hadn't been since high school. I know it sounds pretentious, and honestly, most of the people there are pretentious, but the money does help kids. And I thought maybe, if you weren't busy, you might consider going with me. Elena stared at him for a long moment. You're asking me to a charity gala? Yes. You do realize I'm a florist in Brooklyn, not a socialite. I've met the socialites. I prefer the florist. Something flickered across Elena's face. Surprise, maybe even pleasure, but then her expression grew cautious. Marcus, I don't think you understand what you're asking. I don't have fancy dresses or know which fork to use for which course. I'd be completely out of place in your world. My world is full of people who know exactly which fork to use and have nothing interesting to say with their mouths. Marcus stepped closer, drawn by an impulse he didn't fully understand. You're the first person in years who's talked to me like I'm human instead of a bank account. Eleanor's cheeks flushed slightly. I still don't know your last name. Sterling. Marcus Sterling. Elena's face went very still. Sterling Industries Marcus Sterling? Unfortunately, yes. The billionaire tech CEO who's on magazine covers and dates supermodels Marcus Sterling. I don't date supermodels. I reject supermodels, apparently. Catherine has the photographs to prove it. Despite herself, Elena laughed, a sound that made something in Marcus's chest feel lighter. This is insane. You know that, right? Completely insane, Marcus agreed. Will you come anyway? Elena looked around her small shop, at the flowers she'd arranged with care, at the simple life she'd built from the pieces of her broken heart. Then she looked back at Marcus, who stood there in his $1,000 suit asking her to step into his impossible world. I don't have anything to wear to a billionaire's charity gala. Is that a yes? Eleanor took a deep breath. That's a yes, but I have conditions. My conditions, Eleanor said, crossing her arms as she faced Marcus in her flower shop. First, I'm not pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm Elena Rodriguez, a florist from Brooklyn whose husband died in a car accident and who sometimes cries while watching romantic comedies. No fake backstory about European boarding schools or trust funds. Marcus nodded, finding her honesty refreshing after years of calculated personas. Agreed. Second, you're not buying me a dress that costs more than my monthly rent. I'll figure something out or I'm not going. Elena, those are my terms, Marcus. I won't be your charity project or your pretty woman fantasy. The reference stung because it hit close to home. How many times had his business associates joked about upgrading their wives and girlfriends? But looking at Elena's determined face, Marcus realized she was protecting something precious, her dignity and independence. Understood. Anything else? Yes. Elena's voice softened slightly. At some point during this fancy gala, I want 5 minutes where you tell me something real about yourself. Not CEO Marcus Sterling, just You. Deal. The next evening, Marcus stood in the marble lobby of the Plaza Hotel, adjusting his bow tie for the third time. The Sterling Foundation Gala was in full swing upstairs, Manhattan's elite writing tax-deductible checks while networking over champagne and caviar. He'd attended dozens of these events, but tonight his palms were actually sweating. When Elena stepped out of the taxi, Marcus forgot how to breathe. She wore a simple black dress, elegant but not designer, probably from a department store. Her dark hair was styled in an updo that showed the graceful curve of her neck, and she wore minimal jewelry, small pearl earrings and a delicate gold necklace that caught the light. She was stunning, not because of expensive styling or professional makeup, but because she looked like herself, confident, genuine, beautiful. "You look," Marcus started, then stopped, realizing every word that came to mind sounded inadequate. "Like a florist trying not to embarrass a billionaire?" Eleanor asked with a nervous smile. "Like the most beautiful woman I've ever seen," Marcus said honestly. Eleanor's cheeks flushed. "You're not so bad yourself, Mr. Sterling." The ballroom was a study in opulent excess, crystal chandeliers, gold-leafed walls, tables set with more silverware than most people owned. Elena's eyes widened as they entered, and Marcus felt a familiar surge of embarrassment at his world's absurd luxury. "This is," Elena began, "ridiculously over the top." "I was going to say impressive, but yes, also that." Marcus guided her through the crowd, introducing her simply as Elena to the board members and investors who approached. He watched her handle each interaction with grace, asking genuine questions about the foundation's work, while deflecting inquiries about her background with polite but firm responses. "She's lovely," whispered Margaret Whitman, the foundation's board chair, as Elena excused herself to the restroom. "Very different from your usual companions." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "She's real." During dinner, Eleanor sat between Marcus and tech mogul Robert Chen, discussing education funding with surprising insight. She'd clearly researched the foundation's work, asking pointed questions about program effectiveness and community involvement. "You know," Robert said to Marcus as dessert arrived, "she actually understands what we're trying to accomplish. Most of the women at these events just smile and look pretty." Marcus watched Elena laugh at something the elderly philanthropist across the table had said, her eyes bright with genuine amusement. She belonged here, not because she fit the superficial requirements of his world, but because she cared about things that mattered. After the speeches and auction, Marcus found Elena on the hotel's terrace looking out over Central Park. "Overwhelmed?" he asked, joining her at the railing. "A little, but also amazed." Elena turned to face him. "The foundation raised $2.3 million tonight. That's going to change a lot of kids' lives. You remembered the exact amount?" "I always remember numbers that matter." Eleanor smiled. "Now about that 5 minutes you owe me. Something real about Marcus Sterling." Marcus loosened his bow tie, considering where to begin. "My mother was a third-grade teacher in Queens. She raised me alone after my father left when I was 7. Every night, no matter how tired she was, she'd help me with homework at our kitchen table." Eleanor listened intently as Marcus continued, his voice growing softer. "When I made my first million, I bought her a house in Westchester. She cried and said it was too much, but she loved the garden. She'd spend hours out there, talking to her flowers like they were old friends." Marcus paused, remembering. "After she died, I threw myself into work, because it was easier than missing her. I haven't talked to another human being the way I'm talking to you in years." "What changed?" Eleanor asked gently. "You did. You looked at me like I was worth knowing beyond my bank account. You gave me hope along with those flowers." Marcus turned to face her fully. "I've been thinking about you for 3 days straight, which is both wonderful and terrifying." Eleanor's eyes shimmered in the moonlight. "I've been thinking about you too, about how you looked when you talked about your mother, about how you rejected 8 beautiful women because you were looking for something real." "Eleanor, I know my world is complicated. All worlds are complicated, Marcus, mine included." She stepped closer. "The question is whether we're brave enough to figure it out together." Instead of answering with words, Marcus cupped Elena's face gently in his hands and kissed her. She tasted like possibility and hope, and everything he'd forgotten he wanted. When they broke apart, Eleanor smiled up at him. "So what happens now?" "Now," Marcus said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice, "I'd like to take you to breakfast tomorrow, somewhere that serves coffee in regular cups and doesn't require a reservation." "I know just the place," Elena laughed, "but fair warning, the owner's a florist who might make you help water the plants." "I can't think of anything I'd rather do." As they stood together on that terrace, Looking out over a city full of millions of people, Marcus Sterling, billionaire CEO who'd rejected 8 models, realized he'd found something more valuable than all his wealth combined. A woman who saw his heart and chose to stay. And now that you've reached the end, tell us in the comments, where are you watching from? Your presence matters, and your story does too.